A very warm welcome to our 2 days webinar with John from Squared Paper. I'm your host, and my responsibility right now is to send a very warm welcome to all of you. I may tell you what our agenda is for today, and then I will hand over to John, who will give us a deep insight into Squared Paper's Busby product. John will tell us a little bit about Squared Paper as a company. Then we will look into the product in general, and we will get a live demo on Busby. And afterwards, we will hear about some news that is mainly about the newest integrations that have happened with third-party software systems or additional microservices that have been implemented. We will see the new scheduler product, what is about scheduled workflows. We will see a multi-site deployment, how this can be done and what it's good for. And then last but not least, we will see the new TX chain overview UI that is more for live environments. While the others play in the file-based environment, this is for live ecosystems. And what you spotted right now already, Busby is a product that does not only play in the file-based domain where we work quite a lot, but really plays on both sides of the world. So then it's up to me to hand over to John. John is this guy that you can see here on the top line of our agenda, top 2 days speakers panel. He's director at Squared Paper. I'm Stefan Pflütze, Managing Director of Extreme Media and Extreme Distribution. John, I think now it's time to hand over to you. I will try to move the screen sharing to you.
As we said, I'm certainly don't currently look as smart as I did back then. I don't know why my actual webcam isn't working, but I'll share my screen for sure. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Technology is working so far. So as Stefan said, my name is John. I'm from Squared Paper. What I'll do is I'll just give a quick overview of who Squared Paper is, what we do, and then a little bit about Busby, which is our main product. Show you a few bits and pieces about it, including some of the new features. First of all, who are we? For those of you who have not been on one of our webinars before or haven't come across us, we are a company who help you join systems together, so linking your hardware and software, simplifying your workflows and control, etc. Imagine we were a system integrator, but we don't plug in cables and move boxes around. We write little bits of software to join the other bits of software and hardware together. So we call ourselves broadcast software integrators. We're just a small team. There's about 6 of us now, based in Reading in the UK. But between us, we have quite a lot of experience with many years' experience in the broadcast industry, creating control, automation, and management systems. Most of our backgrounds are from either broadcast service providers or broadcasters, or from automation or media management vendors. We're wholly owned by our team with no external shareholders. And one thing that I should note is we're all engineers. So the reason Stefan is on the line here is to help us promote some of our products, and because we're not good at marketing. So apologies in advance if I stumble on any words during this webinar, but we are all engineers, and anytime you are involved in a project with us, you would be working directly with the engineers who are writing the software and doing the integration. Our flagship product is what we call Busby, and that's our enterprise integration toolkit, as we call it. It's difficult to market it specifically as one product because you can make so many different things with it. One we either the two ways we either do business with people is we either develop a complete custom solution and just kind of deliver it and say, well, here's your solution, here's all your custom services, here you are, this is yours now. Or we will say, or somebody will buy Busby from us as a toolkit, and we'll provide training and documentation on how you can set up your own system and do integrations with it. Or quite often it's also a mixture of both. So we might do the initial solution and then you might make changes or add your own microservices, etc. So yes, what is Busby? Busby is a media-focused integration toolkit, and it's based around an enterprise service bus and uses microservices to join things together in the system. Now, the reason there are other platforms out there that do similar things, like for example, you may have heard of MuleSoft, like an enterprise integration system, but one of the key benefits to Busby is it's a lot simpler, but also the main thing is it knows about media. So you'll see when I show you as part of the demonstration, there are when you go into and start setting up your services or writing a script, it's got built-in functionality already to know about things like subtitle files, FFmpeg transcoding, and built-in connectors to broadcast industry services and devices. So if you were using Busby to start to build a system to build up some things for yourself and your organization, you've got quite a big head start, because you can see down here, and I'll talk about some of these in more detail, it's got the framework for dashboards, it's got framework for alarms, configuration, authentication, etc. As I mentioned, it can be provided as a solution or a toolkit or a mixture of both. And it can obviously these days be deployed in the cloud or on premise or a mixture of both. So there are some core things that we think that you need when you're building a system, building a software platform, or you're building some kind of solution. We think that you need configuration and authentication, and you need some way of integrating things. You often need workflow tools. You quite often need to schedule resources and analyze things. You often need device control, and more than often you need to do some alarms and some monitoring by exception, along with being able to view things in dashboards and do some kind of reporting. So all these are things that are built into Busby. You have to do configuration, and you might write some little bits of code around these things to help yourself, but you've kind of got a head start if you're building a system. These things are built in and available for you to use. So probably it makes sense now if I jump onto a different screen and give you a little bit of a demo of some of the things.
John, while you are preparing the demo,
yes.
I just want to encourage everyone who is with us here in this webinar to write questions on the bottom end of the user interface that you got. You should be able to reach the chat. Please type us your questions at any time. Thank you.
Oh yes, please, and then we'll answer them either then, or we will answer at the end, whichever Stefan prefers. So it's the easiest thing to explain how this all works is probably going to be to actually start with the configuration tool. Now, one thing I should say about the configuration is, as I said, configuration is one of the things. Managing the configurations, one of the things we think you always need when you're making a system. So all our configuration is actually held in an Elasticsearch database, and it's all JSON, but that would be just horrible if you had to try and write all that yourself and manage that. So we've made this config editor, it's a centralized web-based configuration editor, and that keeps all the configuration for, I'll show you now, for all the microservices across your system in one place. You don't need to deploy configuration files or databases around between different systems. You'll notice in the system when you log in, you can see various things such as deployments. That's a useful feature I'll just briefly tell you about. One thing that you can do with Busby is you can have the same configuration but across different systems. So this is very useful when you've got a production system and you might have a development system and a staging system, and what you're able to do is use the same configuration, and you're able to point it at different systems when you what's called publish the configuration. And one thing to help you out with that, because obviously not all the settings are going to be the same across those systems, we've got a few concepts here such as variables, which means, for example, you can set up variables like I might have something like file shares, and then maybe I'll call it ingest, and on my demo system it might be something like home/ingest, and then on my staging system it might be something else. And what that means is when you go to publish your configuration, when you select the system, you may have referenced these variables in various places around the configuration that I'll show you in a minute. You may have referenced these variables in a script or in a microservice, and when you publish your configuration, the variables will be replaced on the output to the target system. The same with what we've got here, which is locations, which is another way of setting up. You might have an S3 bucket, or you might have something like a folder monitor or something like that. So I'll show you a bit more around here. So as you can see, we've also got hosts here. You can decide which of your hosts you want individual microservices to run on, or they might run on more than one. So in that case, you can add a host to your system, and that's simply the host name. And when you click on it, you can set up some basic things like, for example, I'll show you briefly about alarms later. You're able to go in here and set up some basic alarms for those machines, and that will add them to the alarm and monitoring system. Services down here, this shows you all the different microservices we've got in the system. And if I click on one, for example, this HTTP API, you can see there are various options that you can fill in. This is me setting up the microservices that I want to expose on the API, and then in here I can select which hosts I want that service to be running on. So then if I go down to steppers, these are services which are stepping jobs through workflows. We've got drivers, and this is essentially controlling third-party devices or systems. But one of the most interesting and useful things to show you is going to be the workflows. So let's say, for example, I'm setting up a compliance workflow. Here's one that's prepared earlier, as they say. You can see you get this graphical workflow editor, and you have a mixture. You have some pre-built nodes you can select here for your workflow, or you can do some scripts. But the key thing to note is there are basically two types of workflow steps. There are automatic steps and manual steps. Manual steps are something where a user needs to do an intervention. For example, they might do some markup in a video player, or they might check something on a workflow board. And automatic steps are where either a script is being run, for example, or a transcode is taking place. There are some helper functions from when you're setting up your own workflow scripts. you can see you can write in TypeScript, JavaScript, or Bash. And when I'm using TypeScript, you can see this is just a demo script here to show some progress. But you can see inside this script, we've got some helper functions. If I start typing Busby, let's say, for example, I want to trigger an alarm in this script because maybe I'm importing a schedule and something's gone wrong. I can start typing Busby dot, and then I can hit alarms. And then if I do a dot, I can do a set alarm. And when I open the brackets, it tells me the name of the parameters I need to fill in and tells me the description about them. So we've tried to make it as intuitive and self-helping as it can be. All these things are also available in the documentation. So yes, you can have manual and automatic steps. Another important thing to note is you've got these ports on the output of the steps, and these refer to, in an automatic step, these refer to exit codes. So say you've got another route that you want to put something down in the workflow. So let's say there was a problem in this script, the compliance job failed, and you want to put it through an auto QC script or a transcoder. Then you could simply add some logic down in your script. You might have a little if statement down here. Then you can do, let's say I might have 2 here, and I can simply add a new port here, and I can say that's exit code 2, and then I can just drag that here to my auto QC step. And that means anytime that script exits with a code 2, the job will be diverted down this path in the workflow. So I should probably, it's all very well having this graphical designer, but how are we going to monitor the status of jobs in workflows and see, and what about when a user needs to interact with things? So there's a couple of ways we can do that. If I sign into our selector, which is our single sign-on user interface, you can see here we've got various options, things what we call workflow boards here, and these are a Kanban style. This is a Kanban style user interface. It's a bit like Trello. The reason it's a bit like Trello is because some of our customers were using Trello originally to manage their media workflows, which is kind of great. It's like a step up from spreadsheets potentially, but it's still very manual. And what we thought would be really useful is if you could have this kind of intuitive list of jobs in the right order, but it could also interact with the workflow system and interact with the devices and services, so you can see progress of jobs in the workflow. So what you can see here, each one of these strips represents a state in our workflow or a group of states. This view is customizable, so if I go back into my configuration and I go to my boards, click on my compliance board, you can see here that I've got these strips in this board, and I can set up which states are visible, which jobs show up in which states in which strips. Now, what you might want to do, a common theme is, for example, you might have a login for your customers, so they might have just 3 strips on their board which says waiting, in progress, and done. But then for your engineers or your supervisor, you might have a board with all the states listed individually, so they can see in more granular detail where something is in the workflow. If I click on one of these jobs in the workflow, you can see I've got my notes section where I can add any notes. I can see the history of this job when it went through various states, the user that moved them into the state, or this might just be a Busby user if it was done automatically. And also I've got these tabs, other tabs along here. Now, one thing about our workflow tools is we have the concept of an info block, and what that is just a piece of metadata, and that you can attach that to the job, and that will stay with that job throughout the history of the job. So for example, when we read the files in through a folder monitor at the start, we will attach some information as an info block to say the file name, the path it was in. Then we might do a auto QC on the file, and then we'll receive the result from the QC device, and we'll store that to the job as a info block. And that means you can access the info blocks either manually from a browser, or later on you might use the information inside those blocks to help you make a decision further on in your workflow. There are different ways of viewing info blocks. This is a browser info block, which has pointed me towards a video file. So you can see, I can click through quickly and see the video against this job. You can also, in these boards, you can have filters, like you could have a date picker here, for example, and you can have various tags you can set up. Also, if you've got the right permissions, you can move the jobs up and down the priority list, and they will be if they are going through an automatic step in the workflow, they will be processed from top to bottom in general. Another way of users interacting with the workflow is through task-based user interfaces. So, for example, if I come over here to my compliance markup user interface, I'm going to get the same list of jobs, but in a different view. So I might be a compliance operator. I might only have access to this user interface because I probably don't need the boards. I just need to be able to click on my jobs here, play the video. Now, what I can do also in here is I can add a nudity marker, for example, mark the out point. Going to add that. This is a note, and then I've got these buttons up here. Also refer to the next steps in a workflow. So I'm going to choose Auto Comply Advantage, and then if we head back to our compliance board, you'll see it's moved into this, and this is an automatic step where a script is running that's controlling Advantage. You can also see it's got a tag that says nudity, and if I click on the compliance, I can see that it's attached my notes into an info block which are being stored against this job, which I might use later if I need to refer it to a supervisor or something like that. One thing I should note about the workflow task that I just showed you, this video player task, that's an HTML5 native plugin. You don't need any plugins, sorry, and that is a frame accurate browse player, and you can do multi-language and different subtitles, etc. Other things you can do inside Busby is it's got some alarms and monitoring. So we can see there's like a lamp and buzzer style alarm panel, and I can set up alarms from any microservices inside Busby, or I can trigger them from within a workflow. So this is often used in more live environments where it's not used as a workflow system, but where Busby is being used as for example, a transmission monitoring system. So that's probably enough of the overview. That gives you a very brief overview. I mean, there's so many different things to show. Probably the easiest thing is if you would like to have demos on specific features, that's going to be easiest if we set those up separately. But what I'll do now is just show you quickly about a couple of the new features we've added. The first one, we have added a feature to do resource scheduling, and we've got some diary modules around that. So I'll just jump over to a different system and show you that. So in here, we've now got the concept of being able to add resources and schedule those resources. So this is a system, for example, that was made for a horse racing company, and they want to book which trucks are going to where, and they want to know which people are going to be on those trucks, and they might have other resources. For example, they might have cameras, they might have sound desks that all need to be booked. So in here you can see you're setting up your resources. There's a chain of of history here when the resource has been edited. But this is where you would set up your resources. Now, what we've got now is a calendar view, which allows you to schedule those resources. It's quite intuitive. It's a bit like an Outlook or a Google Calendar. You can simply drag in here and you can say, this is my event. And I'm going to select these resources for this event. Now, you might think, well, yes, I can just do that in Google Calendar or something like that, which you could, but the advantage here, and it's got several advantages, it's got things like clash checking, so you can check that those resources are not scheduled at the same time, or you can make your own custom rules based on some scripts to say, well, this resource can't be used at a certain time. But the key feature, the key thing about this scheduling and this user interface is it's all tied in towards the Busby jobs and events and workflow ecosystem. So this, although this just looks like an event in a calendar, what this actually is behind all this, there's a microservice called the diary service. And essentially this has created a job in a workflow, and basically the job is going to be sitting in a waiting state in the workflow. But at this time, so 4:30 on May the 7th, it's going to move into the processing state, and that might trigger off a whole workflow of things that need to be done. So an example of this is you could use this for some, I don't know, a timed record system or something. You might, and you also don't need to do the scheduling manually. This could be driven via an API or a schedule file that's being imported, and that would set up all your timed events in here, and it would start the job in the workflow, and at the finish time move it into the finished state of the workflow. So it allows you to automate your workflows or part of your workflows, and allows you to make sure, it allows you to do checking of resources and clash checks, etc. We've also created a OTT or TX chain overview user interface. Now, there obviously are manufacturers who have their own dashboards which do this kind of thing, but basically the point about this is you can integrate with any services inside Busby and make a little TX chain. Let me just change back to my PowerPoint screen to show you that. So you can see that in this example, this is an example from this is an example from an OTT playout system. You can see that Busby has been used to connect into various devices via microservices. For example, we've got some harmonic video service and switching services. Over on this side now, when you've got a chain view for each channel. So I can see the status of my channel going through various devices on the system. I can get thumbnails back from the devices. I can click on them. I can get the list of alarms for that device or alarms affecting that channel. You can see they're going red here because there's an alarm, or yellow if there's a warning message. And then if I've got the right access permissions, I can right click on here and I can do things like restart the device, open the user interface, etc. So this allows you to create a one-stop shop for your, let's call it a one-stop shop for your operational staff to have a look in and see the status of all the channels in your system. Another thing we have added is a encrypted zone trunking feature, and this is really useful when you want to distribute your Busby systems between the cloud or an on-premise system, or you might join two on-premise systems up together, but it means you can run different services in different locations. So, this is a good example of where you've got, for example, a cloud zone. You might have a system that you might be processing. Let's say you're a transcode provider, and you're going to be transcoding files for your customers. So they're going to log in.
I quickly need to interrupt you. Sorry. When you show us the user interface, we currently see just a white screen. When you show us the presentation, it works.
So you didn't see anything
white.
Did you not see any of the user interfaces the whole time?
Just the last minutes.
Oh, so you didn't see the. Hang on a sec. So which was the last thing you saw? Did you see the? What can you see at the moment? You can see my PowerPoint.
Now we see the PowerPoint. Yes.
Okay, that's correct. So can you see this user interface here?
No, we have not, but yet. So just the presentation. Yes.
But you can. Oh, there should be a screenshot inside the presentation, so I'm not sure why you can't see that. That's very odd. Okay, I'll send you the screenshot after the call, and maybe you can put it on the underneath the webinar or something. So what can you? Sorry, to confirm, what can you currently see?
The screenshot that now works.
Okay, good. It's working now. We make software. I don't know how to use PowerPoint, so so yes. In case you didn't see that before, yes, you can see this. This is this screenshot from this user interface. So this interface allows you to view the state. Say you're doing an online payout system, you can have a look through here, and you've got a chain for each of your channels. And you can quickly have a glance and say, well, there's something wrong with the channel passing through these devices. This has gone red. There's a warning message on this device. And if you click on one of those devices, we've got alarms here, which are pulled in from a harmonic network management system. We've got data pulled in from IPMI. We've got stuff collected via SSH for the CPU and memory. So you can see it's a central user interface to display all the data we've gathered from various Busby microservices and make a really nice display for your operators to see what's going on across the whole system at a one glance kind of view. So going back to the zone trunking, hopefully you can see that now.
Yes.
Good. So yes, this is a useful feature if you want to extend your services between different Busby systems, and it allows you to do things like use the resources where they're best placed. So let's say I'm a transcode provider. My customers might log into my user interface, but I want that to be available globally. So I've made a cloud zone inside Busby, and I've set up a Busby system in my cloud zone. And my user interface might be connected to an S3 bucket for streaming of my low-res videos. But I've got two data centers, one in London and one in Amsterdam, and I already have a load of transcoders in there, and I already have storage, and I don't want to throw them away and necessarily give Amazon lots of money or some other large provider lots of money to do my transcoding when I've already got the capacity on premise. I might using my cloud zone, I might scale up and I might do some additional cloud-based transcoding, but using so basically this allows me to split up my transcoding services, and I can have some in London and some in Amsterdam. And this is one thing to note, is this is an encrypted TCP connection. In this case, it's outgoing, but it could be incoming. You only need to set up the connection in one direction, which means that kind of reduces the complexity with the IT system. So you only need to open one port. Yeah, and it allows you to connect your, say you've got a cloud management Busby system with your on-premise resources. And you could use that for a multi-tenancy system, for example, if you were offering that as an offering. And the final, I think the final features are just some new integrations we've added to the Busby platform recently. So one thing we added to make that TX chain and help with that management system is we added some integration with some harmonic devices, including the NMX management system. I think we also can integrate directly with the packages and the Spectrum XE service to gather status. check for alarms, register content, etc. We've added drivers for the Telos IP stream audio encoder to gather status and alarms again. We've done some work with Kahuna switches where we can set up projects and tear them down and send it configuration, etc. And two other integrations we've done, which are, firstly, they're available in Busby, but they're also available in the Extreme Fabric version of Busby. We've got a integration now with Pulsar, the auto QC system, and also a Phonexia speech-to-text system, which you might use for doing, I don't know, detecting swear words or setting up subtitles or something. So I think that's basically all of the things I was going to tell you about today. Probably hand back to Stefan to see if he has any questions or if he knows if anybody else has any questions. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. So thanks for the demo. Now there's the question, do you have any questions? Please write them. Please use the chat or the question window that you already have used when you had mentioned that we have had difficulties with the transmission. Just let us know. I'm trying my very best to get this thing here operated.
Obviously, we're very willing. With Stefan, we can arrange if you would like to have a more in-depth demo on any specific features, or you would like to have a play around with Busby yourself. We're obviously more than happy to arrange that as well. Just let us know via the guys at Extreme and we will set that up.
Yeah, so I have several questions. The first one, John, could you give us a little bit of input about the typical use cases of your customers?
So that's a good question. So yeah, it's basically, I wouldn't even necessarily say there was a typical use case. I'd say there's probably a few types of use cases. So yeah, I'll tell you a few examples. For example, obviously there's the workflow system, but one of the benefits which I forgot to tell you about when we were talking about and demonstrating the workflow system is it's not based around video assets. It's not based around media assets. It's very job based. So you can say that anything you want is a job. So this has brought some great benefits. For example, a system we set up for Scottish television where they're using the Busby workflow system to pre-prepare all their transmission schedules weeks in advance. So they receive an advanced schedule from the network, and it just has, it's like a CSV file, and it's got the list of materials that are going to be played out in a day. Well, they need to add secondary events and graphics, etc. So we ingest the CSV file and we create jobs in the workflow. And then we've made some custom UIs. So the scheduling team and the graphics team can simply click through, select the graphics they want and press save, and they're done. And then the day before the transmission takes place, we receive the final schedule file. We convert it into the format of the automation system, and we add in all the graphics and secondary events which have been pre-populated. So this kind of content preparation and schedule preparation is one of the key use cases. Another customer of ours is doing some is making a portal. They're a playout provider, and they're making a portal for their customers to send in schedules, and we will then send the schedules to the automation system, and we will bring back the as runs. So yeah, schedule management is one of the key areas. Another use case is alarms and monitoring. For example, for a large OTT broadcaster, sports broadcaster, we are taking in scheduled data from their API, and we're turning on and off elemental live encoders at the right time when the events need to start. That's using the diary service that I showed you. And then based on those events, when the encoders are live, I mentioned that we had that alarm system, but that alarm system can also be schedule based, and it is in this system. So because it's event based channels they've got set up there, and there's not sports on all the time, they don't want the alarms going off all the time when there's no video coming into their encoders, for example. So in that case, what we do is we've got the alarm system is aware of the schedule, and it can trigger alarms or not trigger alarms based on if there is currently an event on that channel. So yes, another key use case is alarms and monitoring. Other people have decided to make their own workflows and use Busby as a toolkit, and they've gone away and we've supplied them. This is another option. We've supplied the source code and documentation and our software library code, and given them training, and they've gone away and used the microservice framework and the ESB along with all the authentication and configuration that's already built in, but they're actually completely writing their own microservices within their own software development team. So you've got those very different options. There's various other very custom uses of Busby as well, where yeah, basically what I'm trying to get at, I think, is there's not really necessarily a typical use case, but there are groups of customers who are using it for similar things, if that makes sense.
Thanks, John. There's a question from Carlos. How difficult is it to add new connectors, and what are the costs?
Well, so generally, as long as the system has got a REST API or a SOAP API or something similar, or some kind of database that we can get into, depending on the complexity of the service, it's probably going to be, and depending on what integration you need to do, it's probably like a few days to a week's worth of work, and then we work on a day rate, which I believe is about £600 a day. So yeah, you can. That's how. And one thing I should also show you inside. I'll go into this another time on a different demo. So that's if we were making the connectors for you. There is the option, if it's a very simple integration you need to do, like it does a few HTTP posts and gets and does a little bit of business logic, there is a place inside that configuration editor where you can create your own what's called a nano service, and that means you can set up your own service in there to do the integration yourself, depending on you get, and inside that you have all those helper soft functions I showed you about earlier on. So depending on the level of complexity, and if you have people that you want to do the integration yourself, that's also a possibility in there. You can also use the web APIs to do external integrations that way. So, but anyway, sorry, that kind of answered your question a bit too much. But to answer your first question, it usually takes a few days to a week, and it's like £600 a day, I think, is our day rate. I'll need to confirm.
Matthew has a related question.
Okay.
For custom software, does the client or Squared Paper own the IP?
For custom software, Squared Paper owns the IP for obviously the Busby solution. It depends. We've come to various different arrangements with different customers before, and obviously the cost varies, but you can own the IP if you want to. It's an option. We're willing to go with that. We can also do something like a couple of customers where, obviously, because we're a smallish team, we've got some customers where we've got something like an escrow agreement in place, where if we were to go bust, you could have all the code. So those, there's ways around it. We're not trying to say that you're not allowed to own any of the source code. We're open to different arrangements, basically.
So as often, it's the question about who maintains the code, and that results whether it's an exclusive or non-exclusive, limited or non-limited license that we then sell. Okan has a more detailed question about the creating a new workflow support scripting. Are there debugging and testing options of scripts, and does scripts need compiling, or how does them activate?
Okay, so
I think also the question is how does versioning would work in.
Oh, right. So is it, if everyone's still got a little bit of time, if I quickly share my screen again, it's going to be easier to look by sharing my screen, I think. Let me just. That's a good question. I didn't go into as much detail as I could have done. So, and if you would like, I can go on and do another demo with you another time. So, can you see my screen? Can you see that, Stefan?
Yeah, it works.
And could you read out the question again, so I know the points of the question?
The question was about are there debugging and testing options for the script?
So yes, there are.
Compiling required.
So okay, good question. So the way this works is if I go into let's say I'm going to go in my compliance workflow, because I know there's some jobs in that workflow already. I've got this auto QC script I'm going to make here. First of all, I'm just going to assign that to my script step. This is something you do need to do. I'll just set that up now. As you can, so you talked about versioning. Whilst I'm just setting up this script to have a script step, when I go to save, and if I go load here, I can see all the various versions of the configuration that are on this system. When I publish, I can put a comment in there, and I might say added new script. So we're versioning the configuration. Now all the configuration is stored inside an Elasticsearch database. And what happens is all of the configuration versions are saved, and then when I press publish, there's another index inside there, which is the live configuration index. And then what happens if I'm writing my script in here? Let's just show you. What I'm able to do, I don't know if I'm going to need to refresh this first or not. Say I've got a script here, I'm able to go to run, and this isn't, hang on, I need to refresh my page, sorry about this, because I've only just added that. The first time I do that, I need to refresh. So what I'm able to do, go back to my workflow. Inside my script here, I can go to my run tab. Now what I can do here is I can enter the internal reference of my job. So if I head over to my workflow board, I can grab an internal reference of a job, for example this one, and then the reference I believe is this, Skippy0025. I can paste this in here, I can press search. It's found my job. Now what that means is to debug my script, I can run the script against that job in the workflow, but without running the workflow transitions at the end. But if I click that, you can see it brings up the log from the job, and it also, if I've done some logic inside my script and I would have changed the info blocks inside my script, then what you'll see down here is you'll see the resulting job. So you'll see the job, the state of the job that it would be after the script is run, for example, with the new info blocks and the tags and things. So yes, you're able to debug your scripts inside here. Now, in terms of, you don't need to compile them. What happens when you publish this, you can see in here, I've said, this is I want this script step service to run this script. And what that means, if I jump over to that, there's a service built into Busby called the script step, and you can choose, that allows you to choose which nodes inside here that you want which one of those you want to run that script step. Now that script step might run multiple steps in the workflow depending on how you set it up. But what that does is, because all the configuration is stored centrally, when I publish my configuration, the script step running on that host.core machine is going to load the configuration from the database and then it loads the script into its memory. And then what it does is when a job goes into that workflow state, it will write a temporary file. It will write it as a JavaScript file because it will transpose that down into JavaScript from TypeScript, and then it will execute the script in Node.js, and then it will pull out the standard out and the exit code back into the workflow. So you don't need to do any of that compilation. That all happens. That just happens for you. So I hope that answers that question.
I think it does. John, have many thanks for this little bit of deep dive into
that's
the
fine. It's nice to ask some technical questions.
For an overview presentation that was quite a bit, but you now, I think everyone gets it. It's a super powerful tool that requires some knowledge about the actual architecture. But as we can see it, while it is made by developers, it's made in a way that it's nice to work with as soon as you got the concepts a little bit. John, I have a question that goes hand in hand with that. Do I need to be a developer to configure the system?
I would say not. I would say probably the level that you're going to be is maybe a supervisor or an engineer, or you might be somebody that's interested. I think you do need to know a small amount of coding skills, because I mean there are certain parts of the workflow where you can just drag in pre-built blocks. But I think to get the most out of it and to make it the most flexible, you're going to need to do like small amounts of code. So to just give you an example, most of our workflow scripts that we have on customer systems are probably about 20 or 30 lines long maximum. So you don't need to be a developer, but you might need to know a little bit about scripting. But as I said, it helps you with things. It kind of is self-documenting. So yeah, but it depends what you're developing. If you're developing workflows, yes, you're going to need to know a little bit about scripting. But if you're using it for the alarms and monitoring and using all the pre-built microservices, you're just going to need to use the configuration editor, and you probably wouldn't need to do any coding. So yeah, I would say we like to call it a low-code solution.
Yeah, probably it's a little bit learning by doing, simply to learn from that how you configure the system and then to start with varying from there.
Exactly. One thing I should also point out is one of the options that we normally recommend, if this is a system where people are going to be changing and adding their own configuration quite a lot, we've got various levels of training we offer. There's the basic operational training, and then there's a more in-depth engineering training where we'll come on one, currently not, where we'll come on site and we'll sit down with you for a few days, and we'll do a really deep dive, and we'll go into how you write the scripts, how you deploy the configuration, etc., etc.
Yeah, so probably we should do a session in a short future about an introduction into the configuration and development.
I think that's a good idea.
One last question that I have here noted is, can I have a different user interface for the operators? Is there a designer tool?
So there isn't a designer tool as such, but one thing that I didn't show you in here is there is a dashboarding feature which allows you to and I'll set this up on for another demo. But what you can do is inside there, you can pull out information from various parts of the system, and there is a designer for that, and you can drag things on, and you can add your widgets and say, I want this to come from this part of the system. You can set up your workflow boards I showed you, like the Kanban style thing. You can certainly have different setups of those for different users, and you can customize what gets displayed on there. Yeah, so there are levels of being able to set up, but there isn't a generic drag and drop workflow. UI designer. However, you are also welcome to as I said, one of the options is you can have the source code, and we can show you how we make the user interfaces, so you can do that as well. Obviously, you could use our APIs if you were generating your own user interface. But I think, yeah, I think probably in the future there will very likely be some features where you can, using templates, you can create your own user interfaces inside Busby as well. I think that will be very useful.
So we are still receiving questions. Thanks for that, guys. Please tell us hardware configurations to support this software. What are the requirements, the minimum requirements, and what do you recommend for?
Right, okay, so that's quite simple. Generally, probably, I think 99% of our installations are currently on a CentOS 7 virtual machine, and we've got, depending on how many tasks you want to do, it's a slightly difficult question actually, because it depends on what tasks you want to do and how you want to distribute the software, how you want to distribute the services, and if they're doing any heavy lifting, for example, then FFmpeg transcode, or if it's only monitoring metadata. But in general, if you want a Busby core machine, so you've got the configuration and you're able to set up a few scripts, etc., you're probably going to need something like, we would recommend something like 8 gigabytes of RAM and say like 150 gigabyte disk, but you might mount that onto storage. But yeah, it depends what you want to do. And generally, we also would, I mean, depending on your use case, generally we would recommend a redundant set of virtual machines as well, so that one thing I didn't really explain properly is when you're assigning your microservices to your hosts, you can obviously assign all of your microservices to 2 hosts or 3 hosts, for example, for redundancy. And all of the services inside Busby are capable of doing active passive or active active redundancy. So yes, probably I would recommend a CentOS 7 virtual machine or Red Hat 7, but other platforms can or are supported. Those are that's the most heavily tested environment we've got at the moment.
Thank you so much, John, and thanks to all of you for attending.
Thank you for all the great questions.
Session. We will share that the recording of that webinar tomorrow on our YouTube channel, on our website, and also on our other platforms. Furthermore, I've been asked here, can we get presentations to talk to colleagues, to customers, and so on? Yes, please send us an email on this, and then on one hand, either the recording of this webinar might help, or we do have the information at hand for you.
I can, yep, and if it helps, I can send the PowerPoint. There's not much in it, but I can also send that to you, Stefan, if that's helpful to send out as well.
We will coordinate. Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you, everyone. That was really great. Thank you for your time, and I hope everybody stays safe and well.
All the very best. Stay healthy. Stay safe.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.